Hey, Emily. How are you doing, girl? It is Miguel. That's right, Miguel. Miguel Angelo Trujillo. Um, Sometimes I like to refer to myself as Michelangelo because that's my name, Miguel Angelo Trujillo or Michelangelo. If you say it a little differently, that's what it is. Welcome, welcome to spending some time with me. I appreciate it. And today is the 2nd of January, 2019. And in fact, today is the first video of 2019 that I'm making for you. Pretty amazing. Um, I didn't make one yesterday. I was just engaged in all kinds of other activity on New Year's Day. I went to the gym like I usually do. And let me tell you, it's not easy to find a gym that's open on New Year's Day, which is a federal holiday. It's a holiday when a lot of stores are closed, a lot of restaurants are closed, and basically every gym in the world is closed. And somehow I found a place where I could work out, and thankfully I did. I spent some time on the stationary bicycle. I like the stationary bicycle for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a pretty low impact workout. I spent an hour on that stationary bicycle, and generally I bicycle about 13 miles at the speed that I bicycle, which is not that fast. I admit it's not that fast. But what I do is I try to ramp up the intensity of the exercise. So I might not be spinning those pedals very fast, but I'm trying hard because there's some resistance on the wheel. Yeah. And yeah, so I rode about 13 miles. And here's the thing about spending an hour on the stationary bicycle, it can get a little dull. you know, when you're driving, when you're riding a regular bicycle down the road, there are obstacles to negotiate, right? With a regular bicycle, you need to maintain your balance. You need to avoid rocks and stumps and roots and things like that, bumps. And you also need to avoid pedestrians and vehicles that are driving by if you happen to be on a road of some kind. But when you're on a stationary bicycle, you're essentially sitting in a gym on a piece of workout equipment, and you're essentially staring out into space for an hour. And I'm grateful to my gym mates who somehow have to deal with me just staring out into space while I'm working out on the bicycle. It's pretty funny. And I like to bring headphones with me and wear headphones. Sometimes I can listen to an audiobook through my wireless Bluetooth headphones. I use my cellular phone to feed those headphones data. And that works out pretty well. In an hour, I can go through a solid section in any ebook. Also, I can listen to music. Thankfully, these days, gyms have Wi-Fi, and I can get access to anything, any programming I want using my cell phone. I'm finding myself feeling or sounding a little congested right now. I don't know if you notice, but I've got some congestion in my nose and in my ears. I've essentially got a cold, but it's very mild. It hasn't stopped me from doing anything. And I think that the cause of my virus, or the source of it, was when I visited Six Flags Magic Mountain last weekend, right? I went last Saturday. And on Sunday, I could feel right away that I had some kind of virus. And I thought to myself that maybe I caught something when I was among the groups, the throngs of people in the theme park. I crossed paths with probably 2,000 people. And that is not an exaggeration. There were a huge number of people at Six Flags. There must have been 5,000 people there that day, easy. And so, yeah, it's not surprising to me that I caught a virus. I could have caught a virus by touching nearly any surface at that amusement park, tables and chairs or poles or fences that were in lines on rides. Who knows what I touched, or what was wafting through the air. And I can imagine if I were a kid, even if I were sick, I would be willing to go to an amusement park as a sick person and would not stay home. So and that's fine. For me, that's perfectly okay. Turns out these days, now that I exercise a lot, my immune system is really strong. And when I get sick, it's no big deal. I think I've got such good cardiovascular fitness that sickness doesn't knock me out. In fact, despite being sick since Sunday, I've worked out every day since. And I'm going to work out today. I totally plan to work out today. I plan to work out tomorrow, even as a sick person. And the day after tomorrow, I plan to work out every single day this week, despite being sick. I just don't feel that bad. Now, I do feel congested, so please excuse my voice. Thank you for giving me that leeway. My voice might sound a little deeper. My nose is a little stuffy. In fact, I started noticing, like I mentioned, the day after going to Six Flags, and how I noticed was that my hearing was off. I was having trouble hearing stuff. I was wondering, what is up with that? I didn't have an explanation for struggles with hearing carefully, or hearing sounds that were soft. And I realized only halfway through the day that, hey, wait a second, I'm guessing that maybe my eustachian tubes are filled with fluid or something like that. I must be congested in my head. That's what's causing the rumbling or the muffled sounds in my ears. It took me a couple hours to figure that out. I was wondering, what's up with my ears and my hearing? Well, it's just congestion in my head. And it's funny how it took me a couple hours just to figure that out. So anyway, I've been suffering congestion for the last couple days, and it's no big deal for me. It's easy to ignore. It only becomes apparent when I'm making videos like this or talking to other people at length. A lot of people, I think, don't even notice. And that's good. That's good for me. It's good for them. I think it's funny how I have a feeling, anyway, that the people don't necessarily notice these small things in my appearance or behavior that I notice, that impact me personally. And I'm kind of glad for that. I've always had this, I think I've been perceived as being well adjusted and looking pretty good, even when I'm not feeling so great. And I wonder if that can be said for most people. I just have a really good knack for appearing to be 100% healthy when I'm not. It's a skill. Yeah, it's part of what makes me me. It's part of what makes me special, right? So yeah, I went to Six Flags, and then of course, then it was New Year's Day. After New Year's Day, well, on New Year's Day, I decided that I wanted to do some cooking. I had a lot of the day free, and these days I've been really interested in cooking in my kitchen, and I've been really loving the freedom and confidence that cooking in my kitchen has given me. It really has been an amazing gift to spend time in the kitchen. I'm learning so much about how to use kitchen tools, how to use knives and my pots and pans, and um, using all kinds of other tools like a rolling pin. And one goal that I had made for myself yesterday was to cook corn and flour tortillas. I hadn't really, maybe I cooked flour tortillas. I did cook them using Bisquick mix about 2 weeks ago, and I wanted to uh, get some legit uh, tortilla flour and masa from the store, from the section where people from Mexican cultures acquire their flowers. I wanted to use their flowers. I wanted a more authentico, more authentic uh, flour and corn tortilla instead of the Bisquick version, right? Which is just a little bit different, I think, than a more authentic. So I learned so many new things making these flour and corn tortillas. The first thing I learned was um, it's a challenge to pat that dough into flat discs and then transfer those discs into your pan. It's not easy. There are a lot of tools that cooks and chefs use to press that dough into tortilla shapes. They use presses of various kinds, tools of various kinds. Some people just use their hands, and other people use rolling pins of various types. I have, I think, what's called a French rolling pin. It works pretty well. It doesn't have handles on it. And one thing about this dough is that it's pretty sticky. So I can't just throw my rolling pin on the dough and roll out the dough. You'd think, oh yeah, that'd be easy. That's a no-brainer, right? Well, the dough is real sticky, and it sticks it sticks really well onto rolling pins. So I used wax paper. I put my balls of dough between sheets of wax paper and then pressed on the top sheet with a rolling pin to roll out the ball of dough into a flat disc. And I found that worked pretty well, but there were some problems. The wax paper is kind of delicate. It's just paper, just cellulose covered in wax. And what I found is that even while I was rolling out even just one tortilla, the paper began to rip and tear. And in fact, by the second tortilla, I basically needed to replace either the bottom or top layers of wax paper because they were ripping. And little particles of paper were getting into the flattened tortilla dough. So I struggled maybe 80% of the time making tortillas with rolling pins with a rolling pin and wax paper. It worked pretty well. And toward the end, though, I came up with a new refined method of making it work. And basically, what I did is I took a Glad plastic gallon bag, a Ziploc bag. That is a Glad Ziploc bag, gallon size. Opened it up and used the plastic bag to sort of be the surface, the top and bottom surfaces that was pressing on the tortilla dough. So I found that the plastic was a lot more durable than the wax paper. There's something about that clear plastic. It was pretty tough. It was tough enough, and it worked pretty well. I only had like 5 or 6 tortillas to do at that time once I discovered for myself how well Glad plastic bags work. But I got it done, and I think the more often I do tortillas or I cook tortillas, the better I'm going to be at preparing them, and the quicker I'll be at preparing them. So that's neat. It's great about how I can actually see the progression of my skills in my kitchen as I prepare foods. I'm getting better, and I notice it from hour to hour. I just get better and better. I become more skilled in the kitchen. I develop greater confidence working with knives and cutting boards and rolling pins. And I don't know. I like that. For me, that's the thrill of learning. I love the idea of building confidence and skills in the kitchen. It makes me happy. Makes me feel more confident. And I really love that I'm able to prepare foods that I enjoy. For example, flour and corn tortillas are amazing. You bet. Flour and corn tortillas are how you make burritos and tacos, tostadas, you know? They're very versatile foods. In fact, you can use tortillas and just eat them plain, topped with some butter, and they're good all by themselves. So I'm really pleased. I have a feeling that I'll be baking a lot of tortillas in the future, and I'm just going to get better and better at making them, and my tortillas will become more and more enjoyable to eat. Now, when I finished making the tortillas, I found that there was some room for improvement. This was the first time I had made them, and I found that they were a little thick. I think I need to spend a little bit more time rolling them down between the plastic sheets, making those tortillas a lot more thin. There's something else too. They were kind of stiff. I wanted them to be more pliable. And I'm thinking that in order to solve that problem of pliability, I might have to add some kind of vegetable shortening to the dough, or maybe some oil. I'm thinking about using canola oil, something to soften the tortilla a little bit. It seemed to be a little hard. And then, or at least a little firm. And then there was another aspect of the tortilla. Not only was it thick and firm, but, the taste was good, but it wasn't spectacular, so I think I'm going to be, I don't know, looking for ingredients that I can add to tortilla to make it taste a little better, a little more appealing. Huh? So there's a lot to learn in the world of tortillas. I know that there are people who spend years and years and years perfecting their tortilla making process. I'm looking forward to doing the same. Yeah, I've been cooking all kinds of amazing things. In fact, I had a friend. She invited me to her home, and I brought my tortillas, and we ate a meal with tortillas as a side, and also some cornbread. Recently, I made some cornbread using a Bisquick recipe and cornmeal that I picked up at the grocery store. So I don't know. I've been cooking a lot of things lately and enjoying the process. So, I was thinking we can move on to another segment here. And I picked up this book a long time ago. I took a geology class at Allen Hancock College about a year and a half ago. I really enjoyed the class. I learned a lot. There's so much to learn about geology, so much to learn about our Earth, our planet. There's so many things going on. And one book I picked up is this, to go along with the class, is this book called The Dictionary of Geological Terms, the third edition, prepared by the American Geological Institute. And this is a cool book. I really want to spend more time in it, learning about geology. And I figured that I just open up the book and read a definition of a term, and maybe we can discuss it a little bit. And I can tell you about any additional information that I learned in my geology class related to the term. All right. So here's a word. It's called, the word is index fossil. Index fossil. So an index fossil is a fossil that identifies and dates the strata in which it is found, especially any fossil taxon, generally a genus, rarely a species, that combines morphologic distinctiveness with relatively common occurrence, and that has a broad, even worldwide, geographic range and a narrow or restricted stratigraphic range. The best index fossils include swimming or floating organisms that evolved rapidly and were distributed widely, such as graptolites and ammonites. You can also look at other terms that are related: characteristic fossil or guide fossil. So in my geology class, we did talk about index fossils. These are fossils. I'll just paraphrase what this definition said. These are fossils that are in various strata, that they're sort of key fossils in a certain time period, that were present during a certain time period, that weren't present in other time periods, that geologists can use to sort of gauge the time span of the strata. And this is a fantastic idea. It actually, what's interesting about it at a deep level is that it talks about the impermanence, at least for me, the impermanence of genus and species of life. How, for example, in the as it refers to ammonites, as it relates to ammonites, how ammonites existed for a time, and then ammonites went away, right? Environments changed. There's always this climate change, this geological change that occurs over time, usually very slowly. Ammonites continued existing for a long, long time, but they currently do not exist, at least not to my knowledge. And they have relatives that exist today, I'm sure, but ammonites themselves do not, at least to my knowledge. And I'm not speaking as any authority in the field, but I'm keenly aware of how temporary even long-lived common animals like ammonites were and are. It's temporary. It talks, this idea talks to the temporariness of things, right? How all things shall pass. And you know what? I have a feeling that humans could be an index fossil one of these days. We'll see future geologists using Homo sapiens, ordinary Homo sapiens, as being an index fossil of sorts, I'm guessing, sometime in the future. I mean, I'm talking tens of thousands of years in the future. They'll look back and they'll say, aha, that strata is the human strata. Where those are the humans as index fossils. Now, who knows what will happen in the future? I don't know. I can't predict it. But it's kind of interesting. It sort of goes along with this idea that there's just continual change. Nothing is permanent in the world. I mean, even things that are relatively stable are impermanent. For example, I like to think of atoms as being relatively permanent. But as you and I know, that's not the case. These subatomic particles, even the subatomic particles disintegrate, I think, over time. I think I have a pretty good idea that eventually they fall apart or fall away. Now they last a long, long time. I mean, think about the hydrogen atom. How long, in fact, this is an open question for me. I've only assumed that atoms eventually deteriorate over time. But I think I remember reading about how there is a lifespan, and but I could be completely wrong on this subject. But it makes me wonder about how long electrons last. Like if I had an electron in space, how long would that electron persist in time? I think it would persist for an indeterminate amount of time. And when I say indeterminate, I'm talking trillions of years. Until, well, I don't know. It just may not be clear. Now electrons can change by absorbing and disintegrating. For example, matter and antimatter pairs annihilate one another. I don't know if you have any understanding of antimatter, but it's worth researching a little bit and understanding what antimatter is and how much of the antimatter exists in the world. I think there's not very much. Anyway, let's move on to another subject. It's been a long time since I've thought about those ideas. So let's move on to the question and answer period. That's right, the Q&A session, where you get to learn a little bit about me. So here's question number 121. Are you ever a high maintenance person, and explain? Okay, I am a very low maintenance person. But I think there are times when I am a high maintenance person. I think 90% of the time I'm an extremely low maintenance person, which means that I can take care of my stuff. I can take care of it. I don't need other people to handle my stuff and to do things for me. I'm pretty self-sustaining, self-sufficient, and I'm proud of that. And I have a feeling too, Emily, that you're proud of that too, and that's definitely something to be proud of. I personally admire you and your own self-efficacy. Your ability to sort of manage your own emotions and feelings and thoughts. That's something that I get a sense of even from a distance. And I'm proud that you're so capable. Makes me feel good to contemplate that you're that you basically have your stuff together, and I love that. That's one part of you that I love very much. Now, people have lots of different parts to their personality, and so the question here asks about whether if I'm ever a high maintenance person. And yeah, I sure am. When I get out of my comfort zone a little bit, I can be high maintenance in the sense that I make requests of other people. I might, I don't know, for example, a little bit out of my comfort zone would be being out in the sun a lot. If I'm out in the sun, I don't want to get sunburned. So what I'll do is I'll um, try to locate some sunscreen, right, to protect my skin from the ultraviolet rays of the sunshine. I'm seeking to avoid getting a sunburn. And so, yeah, I can be high maintenance when it comes to um, finding some kind of sunscreen that I can use if I'm outdoors for long periods of time. Yeah. What other times do I tend to make requests? Well, if I don't not getting enough water, or maybe I'm exercising in a way that I'm not familiar with. I don't do a lot. Maybe I'll ask for breaks or things like that. There's also another aspect, but besides the physical, in which I'm a high maintenance person. I think it also has to do with the relational parts of my personality. And I think, Emily, you've probably come to understand this too. So people who I care for, people who I love, people who are my family and friends, I will reach out to them and call out to them and make requests about, so that I can learn about what's going on with them and what's important to them and how they're viewing the world and their life in the world, the meaning that they're creating. And, in that sense, I'm I'm out there. I'm touching base with other people, and I do so on a fairly regular basis. So in that sense, I'm high maintenance, and that is I'm making requests of other people. I care when I care about other people. I want to learn about them. I want to learn about their world. You know, I'm I want to do things with them. I want to share experiences. I do a lot of inviting, um, inviting friends and family to do things. So, and then, if I make commitments, I tend to want to stick to those commitments. And so I'll ping other people about reminding them about certain commitments they've made to myself or to themselves or to us as a group. So, in that sense, I can be high maintenance. And like I mentioned, you probably have noticed that. It just means that you're on my mind, right? I'm thinking of you. Um, what you're thinking is important to me. It's sort of how I care for others, right? It's paying attention. It's listening. It's understanding. It's sort of grasping and grappling with what's going on between us or what's going on in another person's world. I actively try to be empathic and compassionate about other people's experiences. So in that sense, I think I can be high maintenance. So those are two senses in which my personality, where I can be high maintenance. And that's how I'm interpreting that, is when I make requests of other people for stuff, for information or ideas, or requests to help care for me and my body. Okay. So the next question is question number 122. When was the last time you really pushed yourself to your physical limits? Explain. Okay, so here's the thing. I rarely push myself to my physical limits. Now, it's true, I go to the gym almost every day. But when I go to the gym, I don't push myself to my physical limits except when I weightlift. And for me, what that means is that I weightlift to failure. And for me, what that means is that I do an exercise until I can't do it anymore. Or I don't always go to failure, but much of the time I do. I'd say 80% of the time I go to failure, and 20% of the time I don't. I don't think you can always go to failure on every exercise. I'm thoughtful about my working out, and I'll do as many sets and reps as I need to get to the point of failure. But sometimes I just want to maintain in certain areas. I'm not trying to exceed my PRs with every exercise every day. No, there might be people who work out in the gym who do that, but that seems like a really intense workout, to me. I like to see progress made in, 2 or 3 exercises during a workout session, a 1 hour workout session. And, that's good enough for me. Um, in fact, it's very rare that I don't make improvements in even one exercise during my workouts. Sometimes, most of the time, I make improvements in 2 or 3 areas when I work out. So that's good enough for me. Now, the question asks, when was the last time I really pushed yourself to your physical limits? It's not something I do. And that is, seriously pushing myself to my physical limits. Here's why I don't do it. That is a high risk behavior. Pushing yourself to your physical limits is about what raises the risk of injury. And if you raise the risk of injury, you have to be prepared for injuries that prevent you from working out the next time. Here's the thing. I want to work out every day. I want to work out regularly, and I don't want to be sidelined by an injury to any of my muscles or to any of my joints. And so I care for my muscles and joints. I try to protect them. I try to make sure that my workouts progress in a way that is reasonable. For example, when I run and I make improvements in my run, I try to I'll only increase the intensity or duration by no greater than 10% of the race that I did last time I did the race. So, I make gentle improvements. 10% is not a whole lot, but it can be significant. Last time I ran for an extra 4 minutes long. And that was great. I didn't run for 40 minutes longer than I did before because, it's about progressive exercise, and I want to do it as injury-free as possible. I want to avoid the injuries because exercise is just that important to me. I want to do it regularly. And getting injured sort of defeats the intention of getting more fit. In fact, getting injured stops the process of getting more fit. And so I really don't take high risk. I don't really perform high risk activities. That is by, pushing myself to my physical limit. That's just dangerous. It's high risk, and I don't care to do that because I want to exercise tomorrow. Absolutely. So now the question asked, and it's kind of funny how it kind of asks, I go on all these tangents when the question is posed to me. So when was the last time I really pushed myself to my physical limits? I think it was a long time ago. I mean, the point in time that I can think of that I might have done that was when I ran my last marathon. When I ran the Duke City Marathon, I really pushed myself to finish that 26.2 miles. I was probably only trained up to run 20 miles, but I ran an additional 6 miles beyond what I was trained to do. Not smart, by the way. And I'm never going to make that mistake again. The lesson I learned was that it wasn't worth it. That, if you're going to run a race, you're going to be, at least my commitment to myself is that I'm going to be prepared for it. I'm not going to be underprepared. I had a really good race at the marathon, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I could have because I was underprepared physically for it. I had to run an additional, maybe it wasn't 6 miles, maybe it was just 4 more miles than I usually run. So I did like the first 20, 22 miles just fine of the marathon because I'd run 20, 22 miles before. No big deal. But between 22 and 26, those extra 4 miles was a real challenge. I was having some trouble. It took me a couple days to recover from the run that, I don't know, I don't think I cared for. And so I think that was the last time I really pushed myself. And I made a commitment never to do that again. I'm going to be fully and competently trained for any race that I do from here on in. And I've held to that commitment. Like I did the marathon way back when I was, let's call it 26 years old. Maybe I was 24. Yeah, maybe I was 24 years old. Maybe 23. So I was pretty young. Right now I'm about 47 years old. And I think I've done a good job ensuring that I've been well trained for every race that I've been in since. I've got integrity. I've followed through with my commitments, particularly to myself and to my improved health. Yeah. And a part of that is just me wanting to enjoy the process. I want to enjoy the races that I'm in. I want to enjoy running. It's important to me. Enjoying what you do is a priority for me. And part of how I maintain that priority is by ensuring that I'm trained up for the exercise that I do and that I don't do too much. I've done too much before and I've gotten injured. For example, one time I went swimming. Oh, now that I think about it, this might be another example of when I pushed really hard. I pulled a muscle in my bicep. I think I pulled the left bicep here. And I pulled this muscle or a section of it, and it was painful. I had to stop swimming for a couple of weeks. And that was a drag because I loved swimming. And then, so I pushed myself, I think, too hard. That time when I went swimming, caused injury. I did it again. This was about sometime earlier. I was riding my BMX bike. I was really loving it. But I pushed too hard riding my BMX bike. And I pulled my hamstring muscle. I pulled my left leg's hamstring muscle. And it hurt like crazy. It was so painful. So that's the second muscle I pulled. Actually, I pulled my hamstring first, then later I pulled my bicep. And, it's kind of a drag to walk around with pulled muscles. I mean, basically those strips of muscle just break, right? You put too much tension on them for too long and they just recoil like rubber bands. And thankfully, I didn't need to go to the hospital for either one of my my muscle pulls. I didn't have to do any therapy in particular. But the impact that it did have on me is that it really, I lost about a month of exercise for each muscle pull, where I wasn't able to do what I wanted to. And I also endured a lot of pain throughout the day. And a lot of sort of incapacity, right? I mean, I could do things, but with a pulled arm muscle, it's a drag. It's a drag. There were some things I just couldn't do anymore because I had a pulled bicep muscle. Anyway, I know better now not to push myself to 100% when I exercise. So how much do I push myself? Well, I really only need to push myself as much as my muscle needs to be pushed in order to make progress, incremental progress, the next time I exercise. And it turns out a person really doesn't need to work out at 100%. They could work out at 50% or even 40% and still make improvements. That's what's the great thing about the human body, really, is that you don't have to work out that hard in order to make progress. Even just a little bit of an improvement. Like when I do weightlifting, if I just try to do one extra rep, my body will respond to that stress, and next time I work out, I'll be able to do that. And generally, I'll be able to do that one extra rep again, and then try to do a second extra rep. And and I can do all that even without necessarily going to failure. I know failure, it's kind of interesting. Failure is a useful guide, but it's not the end all be all. And it may be going to failure when your exercise might make for more efficient muscle building. It might even make for the most efficient muscle building, but it doesn't account for all muscle building. I've discovered that I don't have to go to failure every time to make improvements. All I need to do really is exercise just a little bit more, a smidge more than I did before. And I can make gains. So that's one of the wonderful, beautiful things about the human body. I don't have to, every workout, that also makes every workout a joy. Imagine if every time I worked out, I had to go to failure on every exercise, every time to make any progress at all. That would be rough, and it would turn my exercise routines into something possibly I wouldn't care for because would be so strenuous. Turns out, human body doesn't need to be strained all the time. In fact, it rarely even needs to be strained. Even very small micro changes translate well into the future. And so that's great. I can still make progress and not kick my butt every time in the gym. So anyway, that's my workout philosophy. And here's the thing. It probably is a suboptimal workout philosophy. Hey, I accept it. It's probably suboptimal not to go to failure on every exercise, every time, every day. But you know what? It keeps my joy. It keeps my happiness. I like doing a workout routine that I enjoy, and that is not, say, the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. I don't think I've got the mental energy. Really, I don't think I've got the mental energy to do a workout sort of more intense than any other workout that I've ever done and do it every day. I just don't have the mental fortitude for that. And you know what? I don't need the mental fortitude. So pleased by that. Anyway, what's the next question? Question number 123. What's one of your hobbies? All right, I'm actually kind of curious about what some of your hobbies are. And I would love to learn more about the hobbies that you engage in every day. I have some ideas about what hobbies you might enjoy. For example, I think you enjoy drawing. I think you enjoy producing art like watercolors, using watercolors and water pencils and crayons. I think you might use paints on occasion, but I think you might be a pen and pencil kind of drawer myself. And I think that's kind of a hobby for you. Also, I've got this idea that you may be into decorating, and that is decorating your room and making things look beautiful on paper. adding designs to your words, to your poetry, to your stories, adding pictures, yeah, yeah, decorating. And I also think that one of your hobbies might be gardening. I think you've spoken to me in the past about getting plants, putting them in order in your room and around the house, and giving them water and giving them light, and just gardening plants, giving things care so that they can, giving plants care so that they can grow and thrive in the world. And I really appreciate that. Now, as for my own hobbies, well, right now I could say my hobbies are, I guess my number one hobby right now, today, is cooking. Yesterday, today I spoke about how I cooked flour and corn tortillas yesterday. And so for me these days, spending time in my kitchen is essentially a hobby that I do. And I do it nearly every day. I prepare all of my food in my own home, most every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And so I'm always cooking. I'm always cooking a little bit here and there, preparing food, getting better at that, developing my skills. So, in fact, right now, if you'd ask me about what my hobby is, it's cooking. I've mentioned in previous videos how I went to Goodwill and I picked up some cookbooks from the Goodwill, and I'm perusing those, learning more about cooking technique and using different spices and putting different foods together to make different dishes. And I tried my hand at food photography. I wasn't too keen on it. Maybe in the future I'll do more of it. But right now it's cooking. So anyway, I'm going to wrap up this video right now, Ham. I want you to know that I love you very much, and that I'm committed to supporting you. I also want you to know that, I understand how when I reach out, it might not necessarily be at a time that's convenient for you. And, I fully accept that. I encourage you to um, say no when it feels right to you. And I'm really a person who honors your autonomy, and I'm a big believer in consent, and I'm really just wholly focused on respecting and honoring your choices. And for me, that's my own personal journey. It's sort of my own personal development where that's an avenue of my personal development where I'm essentially highly focused on the other person and respect and honoring for their choices and decisions. For me, it's a very conscious way to sort of relate to other people. I want you to know that, I might be, I might, I might, might be sad sometimes that that you're not as willing to reach out when I'm reaching out. But I recognize that, there will be a time, I'm hopeful anyway, that there will be a time in the future when our desire and interest for reaching out match. And I'm willing to wait. I'm patient. My love for you is unconditional. And what that means is that I am committed to supporting you no matter what. And I'm committed to loving you no matter what. That's my goal, that's my interest, that's my intent. And for me, that's how I enjoy life. When a door is closed, I walk by it. When a door is open, I walk through it. you know, I respond to my environment, and I hopefully I do so in a calibrated way that makes you feel heard and listened to and understood and not judged. So that's my goal. And anyway, thanks for spending some time with me. Maybe I can spend a little bit more time just talking briefly about, acceptance and what that means to me. One thing I'm finding as I grow older is just how important acceptance is in a person's life. I've got this sense that when you're confronted with a new situation, quite often what we tend to do as human beings is make judgments, right? And it's important to make judgments. It helps our critical thinking ability. It's how we make decisions, how we choose to go or not to go forward in various aspects of our lives. And but judgments can sometimes be hurtful, right? When I judge others or I judge myself, sometimes I can judge harshly. Sometimes I can take another person's behavior as sort of a coldly, as sort of a cold shrugging off of requests of mine. And and so for me, my life is all about this process of moving from judgment into acceptance. Um, in fact, let me give you an example. Um, so I tend to eat pretty strictly. I try to eat vegan, and I'm a calorie counter. And so what that means is that I'm really focused on the food that I eat and making sure that I eat highly nutritious food and that I eat just the right amounts for my body. And now there are times when my self-control is not perfect, right? I'm a human being and I'm influenced by my environments, the sound, the smells and the tastes and how I'm feeling at the time. And so I have some more or less self-control during the day, and I might eat things on occasion that I'm not proud of necessarily. I might have fudge brownie and not count it. I might have, I don't know, some nachos and with cheese on it. That's not entirely vegan. That's not vegan. And I struggle just like everyone else. And I want you to know that I struggle too. I'm not perfect. And I don't always have high levels of motivation to eat as strictly as I want to. And so, there are times when I judge myself. Um, I might even call myself, when I'm lacking self control, sometimes I might even say that I binge on one food or another, like, on one thing. I don't know. Now, I don't like using the word binge in itself because it's got these connotations that are judgy. They're basically judgy connotations. And so what I'm trying to illustrate is this process that I go through. Like the other day, I ate a lot of chocolate flavored rice cakes and I didn't calorie count them. The other day is just yesterday. Now, I regret not eating the chocolate flavored rice cakes. I mean, I regret eating them and not counting them. And I caught myself saying the word binge. But here's the thing. I think, like I mentioned earlier, that word is kind of judgy. So today I've been thinking about how, human beings eat the way they eat. We've got certain biological and psychological characteristics, and we're imperfect. And, I have a very structured way of eating, and there are times when I lapse. And, I also realize that pretty much everyone binges occasionally, all the time. It's just part of being human. And so for me, there's this sense of self-empathy that I give myself. I recognize, basically, I universalize the problem area, right? There are people who binge all the time and they call that intuitive eating. I mean, binging is a kind of intuitive eating. Like, you stop when you're full. And there's physical stops to that behavior that's just naturally in a human body. And so I'm grateful for these stops. And it's a very common thing for people to do. Most people binge on occasion, and I'm not even going to call it binge. I'm just going to. It's sometimes the labeling of a word can sort of give you an idea of the intention or the attitude you have toward a certain behavior. I don't like using the word binge. I think I called it another phrase lately. What was it? It was sort of like, what was it? It was, maybe intuitive eating. Intuitive eating is a phrase that is a positive spin on binging, right? So maybe I intuitively ate for a while, you know? And I'm not necessarily thinking it's the best thing for me to have done, but occasionally I do intuitively eat. I eat based on, sometimes how I feel instead of how I think. And so I've gotten to a point where, there are times when I intuitively eat and I thoughtfully, reasonably, I come from, I sort of reapply my values when I regain self-control. And so maybe I eat a little less the next day, right? If I intuitively eat one day, I eat a little less the next day. And these are moderate changes, right? I eat just a little bit less, maybe a few hundred calories less the next day. That, I think, is a reasonable approach to intuitive eating, right? You just get a little smarter the next day. It's about lessons learned. It's about sort of making incremental improvements. And it's also about acceptance. So do you see, I don't know, do you see the arc of my story? The arc goes from engaging in self-criticism, labeling, recognizing the label, and then changing the name of it and engaging in more acceptance, universalizing the problem, and turning the judgment into just sort of like um, an acceptance of what life is like, right? This is human nature, right? We're human beings managing our environments, internal and external, and we're just doing the best we can with the resources that we have in the moment. It's about waiting until we're more resourced, and then when we're resourced, making changes in accordance to our values. So I wanted to talk about that arc of going from judgment to acceptance. I want you to know that that's a real thing. It's a thing that human beings do. It's how we manage our behavior. And I wanted to use my history as an example, something that maybe you can use in your own life, going from judgment to acceptance, going from excursions, certain behavioral excursions, and then over time managing those excursions in behavior. And anyway, I wanted to share that with you as a good example of, this process of being humans and being human and making incremental improvements, and how that can be done with moderation and peace, self-care, compassion, and how it's not the end of the world. How there's always a tomorrow where you can make improvements and live your version of the best life that you can live, right? By your choices and just recalibrating for the environment that you live in. So anyway, I'm happy that I was able to share that with you today, Emily. like I said, I hope you have a wonderful day. And yes, indeed, I want to mention that this weekend I do plan to go to Six Flags Magic Mountain again. That's right. I'll tell you what, my life is all about celebration and enjoyment and happiness and getting out there and just putting myself out there and loving the life that I have every moment that I can. And again, I love you. I hope you have a wonderful day. And I'll talk to you later. Peace.